The clock above the bar read 11 when Vincent Castellano finally pushed his chair back from the long oak table. Outside the windows of Don Marco's, the snow fell in slow, deliberate sheets, the kind of snow Manhattan only saw a few nights each winter. Inside, the air smelled of espresso, cigar smoke, and old wine. 6 men in dark suits remained seated, watching him in silence, the way one watches a king prepare to leave a throne. "That's enough for tonight," Vincent said. His voice carried no anger, only finality. The men nodded once. No one questioned him. No one dared. He buttoned his black overcoat and slid the heavy gold ring back onto his right hand, the engraved crest catching the dim light for a brief second. 36 years old, sharp jaw, dark eyes that had seen too much, and a name that opened every door in Little Italy. Vincent did not smile when he walked out. He never did. The cold hit him like a slap as he stepped onto Mulberry Street. His driver, Tomas, was parked 2 blocks away near Grand. Most bosses would never walk that distance alone. Vincent always did. He had a strange habit on nights like this, slipping into the back alley behind the restaurant for 3 or 4 quiet minutes before getting in the car. It was the only time of day he allowed himself to be just a man and not a name. The alley was narrow, lit only by a single yellow bulb above a kitchen door. Steam rose from the grates. Snow gathered on overflowing trash bins. He walked slowly, his polished shoes pressing fresh prints into the slush, his breath ghosting in front of him. That was when he heard it. A thin, broken sound, almost lost beneath the wind. A baby crying. Vincent stopped. His hand moved on instinct, sliding inside his coat to the grip of the pistol holstered against his ribs. In his world, no sound was ever innocent. He listened again. The cry came from behind a stack of cardboard near the dumpster. Weak, hungry, real. He stepped forward, slow and silent, the way men in his profession learn to move before they learn to speak. He reached the corner, lifted the loose flap of cardboard with one gloved hand, and froze. A little girl looked up at him. She could not have been more than 7. Her coat was 2 sizes too small, torn at the elbow. Her dark hair clung to her cheeks in damp strings. Her lips were blue. In her thin arms, wrapped tightly in a cloth that should have been thrown out months ago, lay a baby, no older than a few months, his face pale as paper. The girl did not scream. She did not run. She only held the baby tighter against her chest, as if her body alone could keep him alive. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking like ice. "He's cold. Please, mister, don't let him die." Vincent did not move. Something inside the most feared man in New York simply stopped working. He had stood over bodies in basements without blinking. He had buried friends, sentenced enemies, watched his own sister be lowered into the ground. For 7 years, no tear had touched his face. But now, looking down at this small, shivering child, at the baby blue beneath her coat, at the way she trembled while still trying to shield someone smaller than herself, the world tilted under him. Then she lifted her face fully into the light. Her eyes. Vincent felt his breath leave his chest. He knew those eyes. He had loved those eyes. Years ago. In a different life. His knees almost gave. Without a word, he tore off his overcoat, the heavy black wool still warm from his body, and wrapped it around the baby and the girl together. Then he reached for his phone, his hand shaking for the first time in years. "Tomas," he said quietly. "Bring the car. Now." The Bentley moved through the snow like a black shadow, its tires hissing softly against the wet pavement. Inside, the heater roared at full power, but the little girl still trembled. She sat curled against the door, her thin legs tucked beneath her, the baby pressed so tightly to her chest that her knuckles had turned white. She did not look at Vincent. She did not look out the window. Her eyes never left the small face wrapped in his overcoat. Vincent watched her from the seat across, one hand gripping his phone, the other resting motionless on his knee. He had questioned hardened men in cold rooms and read their faces in seconds. He could not read this child at all. He pressed the phone to his ear. "Bella," he said when the line clicked. "I need you at the house. Tonight. A baby. Maybe 3 months. Hypothermia. And a girl. 7. Same condition. Bring everything." Bella Moreno did not ask why. She never did. "I'm 20 minutes out," she answered, and the line went dead. Vincent set the phone down. He studied the girl again, careful, gentle, the way a man approaches a wounded animal he does not want to startle. "What's your name?" She did not answer at first. Then, very softly, "Luna." "Just Luna?" She nodded. "And the baby?" Her arms tightened around the bundle. His name is Elias. A pause, a breath. My mom said I had to protect him. She said never let anyone take him. Vincent leaned forward slightly. Where is your mom now, sweetheart? Luna's lips trembled. She turned her face toward the window and said nothing more. He did not push. He had learned, long ago, that some silences were sacred. The Bentley turned off the highway 20 minutes later and slid through the iron gates of the Castellano estate. 2 armed guards stepped back as the car passed. The drive curved through bare trees crusted in snow, and at the end of it stood the house, vast, white-stoned, every window glowing soft amber against the dark sky. Tomas opened the back door. Vincent stepped out first, then turned and lifted Luna into his arms, the baby still cradled against her chest. She weighed almost nothing. Her body felt like a bird's, fragile and wet and too cold. The front doors swung open before they reached the steps. Raphael Cruz stood waiting in the entrance hall, a glass of bourbon in his hand, his shirt collar loose. At 40, he was lean, sharp, polished, the man Vincent trusted to stand at his right side. Raphael's smile of greeting died the moment he saw what Vincent was carrying. Boss, he said carefully. Who are these children? Found them in the alley behind Don Marco's. Raphael's eyes shifted from the baby to Luna. They lingered on her face a beat too long. Something passed across his expression. Fast, controlled, almost invisible. A flicker, a calculation. He blinked it away before anyone else could notice. But Vincent had noticed. I'll have a room prepared, Raphael said smoothly. Already done, Vincent replied. He walked past him without another word. Bella arrived within the hour, her medical bag in hand, her dark hair still dusted with snow. She worked quickly in the upstairs guest suite, peeling back the wet cloth, checking the baby's color, his breathing, his tiny pulse beneath her fingers. Hypothermia, she murmured. Mild dehydration. He's lucky. Another hour outside and we'd be talking differently. Luna stood beside the bed the entire time, refusing to sit, refusing to eat, refusing to leave. When Bella finally swaddled Elias in clean blankets and laid him under the warming lamp, Luna climbed onto the chair beside the crib, pulled her knees to her chest, and watched him breathe. Within 10 minutes, exhaustion took her. Her head slid sideways against the cushion. She slept with one small hand stretched between the bars of the crib, fingers resting against the baby's blanket. Vincent stood in the doorway long after Bella had gone. The hallway behind him was dark. The room was warm. He did not turn on the light. He just stood there, watching the little girl breathe. And for the first time in 7 years, something inside Vincent Castellano, something he had buried so deep he had forgotten its name, stirred awake. 5 in the morning came gray and silent over the Castellano estate. Snow still drifted past the tall arched windows, but the wind had finally stopped. Inside the guest suite upstairs, a small figure stirred in the chair beside the crib. Luna opened her eyes before any clock could wake her. She did not stretch. She did not yawn. She slid off the cushion in one quick, practiced movement, the way a child moves when sleep has never been a luxury, and went straight to the crib. Her thin fingers gripped the wooden rail. She leaned over, listened, watched the rise and fall of Elias's chest, and only when she was certain he was breathing did her shoulders drop a fraction. Then she began to sing. It was barely a song, more like a whisper shaped into a melody, low and old, with words in a language she could not possibly know. The notes drifted into the hallway, slipped under the door of the master suite, and reached the man who had not slept all night. Vincent rose from the leather armchair where he had spent the past 5 hours. He had not closed his eyes once. He moved barefoot down the corridor in his black shirt, drawn forward by something he could not name. When he reached the doorway of the guest suite, he stopped. She was singing in Italian, not the polished Italian of restaurants and operas. The crooked, half-remembered Italian of a child mimicking sounds she had heard a long time ago. A lullaby Vincent knew. A lullaby his mother had once sung to Sophia. A lullaby Sophia had hummed under her breath the day she told him she was pregnant. Vincent gripped the doorframe hard enough that the wood groaned. Luna heard the sound and turned. Her dark eyes met his without fear. "He's still cold," she said softly, "but not as cold as before." Vincent forced his voice back into his throat. "Are you hungry, Luna?" She hesitated, then nodded, just once. He brought her downstairs to the great kitchen, a long marble room lined with copper pots that had not been used in months. The cook had not yet arrived, so Vincent did it himself. Toast, warm milk, scrambled eggs. He set the plate in front of her and sat across the wide island, watching her without watching her. Luna picked up the fork the way someone picks up a tool they are not sure they are allowed to touch. She ate slowly. She ate carefully, and after a few bites, she stopped, glanced sideways at him, then folded the rest of the toast and the strips of egg into a paper napkin and slipped it into the torn pocket of her dress. Vincent saw. He said nothing for a moment. Then, gently, "You don't have to save it, sweetheart. There's more whenever you want." Luna looked down at the marble. "Just in case," she whispered. He let it go. "Luna," he said. "Do you have a last name?" She thought hard. Her brow furrowed. "Mommy said I shouldn't tell. And your mommy, where is she now?" The girl set her fork down. "She got sick last week. She didn't wake up." Her voice did not break. It was too tired to break. "A man came after. He said he was going to help. He took me to a house with other kids. Then 2 days ago, he gave me Elias. He said, 'Hold him. Don't let anyone see. Don't tell. Just walk.'" Vincent kept his face still. Nothing in that story matched the shape of an accident. What did the man look like? Tall. He had a watch that was too shiny. She paused. "He said someone was going to come find us in the alley. He said to wait." Vincent's jaw locked. He noticed something then. A small lump in the front of her dress, just above her chest. Every few seconds, Luna's hand drifted up to touch it, checking that it was still there, the way other children might check for a stuffed bear. A little notebook, worn leather, tucked away, hidden. He did not ask about it. Not yet. Instead, he stood, walked to the far end of the kitchen, and dialed his lawyer. "Sal," he said quietly, "I need you at the estate today. 2 children, temporary guardianship, quiet, off the record, immediate." He hung up and turned back toward the little girl. She was still sitting on the tall stool, her hand resting protectively on the hidden pocket above her heart. Vincent did not yet know what was inside that notebook, but every instinct he had built over 36 years was already telling him that whatever it was, men were going to die for it. The morning began like any other at the estate, until it did not. Vincent had just set down his second cup of espresso when the first shot cracked the air. It was not the dull thud of distant fireworks. It was the sharp, unmistakable bark of a high-caliber rifle, and it came from beyond the iron gates. He was on his feet before the sound finished traveling across the lawn. A black SUV had crashed through the outer checkpoint. 2 of his guards lay sprawled in the snow, one motionless, the other dragging himself toward cover with one bloody hand. The vehicle skidded sideways across the gravel drive, and from its open windows, gun barrels emerged like teeth. Glass exploded in the front parlor as bullets tore through the bay windows. "Down!" Vincent roared. "Get down!" He reached the staircase in 4 strides. Luna was at the top, frozen on the carpet, Elias clutched against her chest. She was not screaming, she was not crying. She was only staring at the gunfire below the way a soldier stares at a battlefield he has already crossed before. Vincent took the stairs 2 at a time, scooped both children into his arms, and shouldered open the heavy wooden door at the end of the east hall. Behind it lay the safe room, a windowless chamber lined with steel, soundproofed, locked by a 6-digit code his father had chosen the year Vincent turned 12. He set Luna down inside. The baby stirred but did not cry. Luna sat on the floor without being told, her back against the steel wall, the bundle pressed to her chest. Her eyes were dry. That was what frightened him most. A 7-year-old should have been screaming. She was not. "You stay here," Vincent said, kneeling in front of her. "Whatever you hear, you don't move. Understand?" Luna nodded once. He pulled the door closed and heard the lock engage behind him. Out in the corridor, the firefight had escalated into something organized. Raphael Cruz was already in the front hall, shirt sleeves rolled, a Glock in each hand, barking orders into the earpiece clipped to his collar. 3 of Vincent's men were stacked behind the marble columns, returning fire in disciplined bursts. Raphael moved with the cold precision of a man who had done this many times before, and he was good at it. Within 90 seconds, both attackers in the SUV slumped against their windows, motionless. Silence fell. The kind of silence that follows violence, and feels louder than the violence itself. Vincent walked out into the cold without a coat. The snow soaked into his shoes. He approached the SUV, nodded once to Tomas, who stood guard with a shotgun, and leaned in to examine the closer body. The man's wrist hung out the open window. On it, a watch, black face, subtle silver markings. And on the underside of the band, almost invisible unless one knew to look, a small engraved insignia, a capital H crossed by 2 thin lines. Hale Industries. Vincent's blood turned to iron. Victor Hale, the biggest of his rivals. A man who laundered hundreds of millions through shell companies and shipping ports, who had spent the last decade quietly buying up corners of the New York underworld. Vincent had not spoken to Victor Hale in 2 years. They had a truce, fragile but functional. A truce did not send killers through your front gate at dawn, and it certainly did not send killers for 2 abandoned children. Raphael appeared at his shoulder, breathing slightly hard, smoke curling from the barrel of his pistol. "Boss," he said. His voice carried the controlled urgency of a man offering a reasonable suggestion. "Send them away. Tonight. The girl, the baby, all of it. Whatever this is, it followed them in. They're a danger to this house." Vincent did not look at him. He looked at the dead man's watch, then at the broken windows, then at the eastern wing where, behind a steel door, a 7-year-old girl was sitting with a baby and not making a sound. "No," Vincent said quietly. "They stay." Raphael's jaw tightened. Just for a second. He covered it well, the way he always did. "As you say, boss." Vincent felt that flicker again, the same one he had seen the night before in the entrance hall. He turned away without answering and walked back into the house. As soon as the door closed behind him, he pulled out his phone, scrolled past every name he was supposed to trust, and stopped on one he had not dialed in almost a year. He pressed call. 3 rings. A rough voice answered. "Marcus," Vincent said. "I need you. Today. Bring everything you have on Victor Hale." Marcus Reed arrived at the estate 2 hours after the bodies were dragged off the gravel. He came in a beat-up Ford that did not match any car already parked at the Castellano house. 45 years old, 6'2", hair turning gray at the temples, eyes the color of cold steel. He walked through the broken front entrance with the calm of a man who had walked into far worse rooms. 20 years in the NYPD had taught him not to flinch at bullet holes. Vincent met him in the study. The 2 men shook hands once, briefly. They had history. Marcus had been a homicide detective until 3 years ago, when an internal investigation into a money laundering ring quietly forced him into early retirement. The ring had a name buried inside it. Hale. Marcus had pushed too hard. The brass had pushed back harder. He left the badge on a desk and never went back. Since then, Vincent had paid him for work no precinct would ever sign off on. "Tell me what happened," Marcus said. Vincent told him. The alley, the girl, the baby, the watch on the dead man's wrist. He did not yet mention the notebook. He wanted Marcus to see her first. They went upstairs together. Luna was sitting on the floor of the guest room, building a small tower out of sugar cubes Bella had left on the breakfast tray. Elias slept beside her in a cradle. She looked up when the men entered, her body tensing the way a stray cat tenses, ready to run. Marcus did something Vincent had not expected. He sat down on the rug, cross-legged. 6'2" of former detective folded onto the floor like he had nowhere else in the world to be. "My name is Marcus," he said quietly. "I'm a friend of Mr. Vincent. I used to find people who got lost. I'm not going to ask you anything you don't want to answer." Luna studied him. A long moment passed. Then she pushed one of the sugar cubes across the rug toward him. Marcus accepted it like it was a gift of gold. He spoke to her for almost an hour. About small things. The color of the snow. The name of the baby. Whether she liked drawing. Vincent stood by the window, silent, watching a man who had once interrogated killers turn himself into something soft enough for a child to trust. When Luna finally began to talk about the days before, her voice did not waver. "Before Mommy got sick," she said, "we lived in a building in Brooklyn, the yellow one with the broken stairs. There was a man on the floor below us. He came up sometimes. He was scared all the time. Did you know his name?" Marcus asked gently. "Mommy called him Mr. Webb." Vincent's eyes flicked toward Marcus. Marcus did not move. "One night," Luna continued, "I heard noises. Loud ones. Mommy told me to stay in the closet. But I looked through the crack." She swallowed. "There were 3 men. They were hitting Mr. Webb. He fell down. He was bleeding a lot. Then they left him there." She paused, picked up another sugar cube, and turned it in her small fingers. "He didn't die right away. He crawled. He had a finger, and he was writing on the floor, with his blood. Numbers. Lots of numbers. Then he stopped moving. The room was silent. "What did you do, sweetheart?" Marcus asked. Luna reached into the front of her dress and slowly, carefully, drew out the small leather notebook. She held it for a moment as though deciding whether the world was safe enough for it. Then she handed it to Marcus. "Mommy said to remember important things, so I wrote them down before someone cleaned the floor. Marcus opened it. His face changed. Vincent stepped closer. On the third page, in the uneven handwriting of a 7-year-old, ran a single string of numbers, 24 digits, spaced into groups of 4, copied with the obsessive accuracy of a child who had been taught to never get one wrong. Marcus stared at it for a full 30 seconds without speaking. When he finally looked up, his face had gone the color of paper. "Vincent," he said, and his voice was barely above a whisper. "These are not just numbers. This is an access key." Vincent felt the floor shift beneath him. He looked at the small girl sitting on the rug, sugar cube still in her hand, and understood, with a cold and final certainty, that the child sleeping in his house was carrying something men would burn cities to obtain. They left Luna upstairs with Bella and a fresh tray of food. Vincent took Marcus down to the soundproofed office in the basement, the room where the Castellanos held conversations no microphone in the world was meant to hear. He locked the steel door behind them. Marcus laid the notebook on the heavy oak desk and opened it to the third page. He stared at the digits as if they might still rearrange themselves and turn into something less terrible. "Tell me," Vincent said. Marcus pulled a folded paper from his jacket, a printout, blurred surveillance photos, and a redacted federal memo. "6 months ago," he said, "the Bureau opened a closed file on something called Iron Vault. It's not a building. It's a network, a private digital banking system that runs underneath the regular financial world. Every major criminal organization on 3 continents uses it. Cartels, arms brokers, politicians who launder through shells. Hundreds of billions move through it every year, and nobody can touch it because nobody has access without the keys." He tapped the page. "This," he said, "is one of those keys. 24 digits. The exact format Iron Vault uses for its master administrator credentials. Whoever holds this string can move money, freeze accounts, expose every name on the network." Vincent stared at the small handwriting. A child's handwriting. "Daniel Webb," Marcus continued. "I've heard the name. Last year he was the chief accountant for Iron Vault. 3 months ago he disappeared with a backup of the master ledger. Word on the street was that he was going to sell to the highest bidder, or hand it to the feds, depending on which day you asked." "He never made it," Vincent said quietly. "No, he didn't. He hid in a building in Brooklyn that he thought no one knew about, and he died on that floor while a 7-year-old girl watched through a crack in a closet door." Vincent closed his eyes for one slow breath. "Victor Hale," he said. Marcus nodded grimly. "Hale has been hunting this string for 6 months. He has more men in the field looking for it than the FBI does. Whoever delivers it to him takes over half the underworld. Whoever holds on to it becomes the most hunted person in the country." The 2 men were silent. And right now, Marcus finished. The only living witness to where these numbers came from, the only person on Earth Hale can connect to that ledger, is sleeping in your guest room, holding a baby. Vincent's hands lay flat on the desk. He did not move them. "He won't stop," Marcus said. "Not until she's dead. He can't afford to." Vincent finally lifted his eyes. "No one outside this room knows about that notebook," he said. "Not my men, not my lawyer, not Bella, no one. Just you, me, and the girl." Marcus nodded once. "I'm doubling every position on the property by tonight. I want the perimeter walked every 20 minutes. I want eyes on every car within a mile, and I want you to start digging into Hale's network, quietly. I need to know who he's paying, who he's burning, and who he's fucking." "Done," Marcus said. Vincent locked the notebook in the wall safe behind the painting before they went back upstairs. The rest of the day moved in low, careful gears. Workmen came and replaced the front windows. 2 extra cars rolled into the gatehouse. Bella stayed close to the children and asked no questions. That evening, Vincent sat with Luna in the library. He had not been in this room in years. The fireplace had been swept and lit. The lamps glowed soft amber against the leather spines on the walls. Luna sat on the rug at his feet, a small picture book open across her lap, sounding out words one at a time. "Mutane," she tried. "Mountain," Vincent corrected gently. "Mountain." She turned the page. Her finger traced a line of letters about a fox who lost his way and found a new home with a stranger. She did not understand all the words yet, but she leaned closer to the page, frowning with serious concentration. When she reached the last sentence and read it correctly all by herself, she lifted her face to look up at him, and she smiled. It was small, brief, almost shy, but it was the first time Vincent Castellano had seen this child smile, and it cracked something in his chest he did not know was still there. Hours later, after Luna had fallen asleep beside the dying fire, Vincent stood over her with a blanket in his hands. The firelight moved across her face, the shape of her cheek, the curve of her brow. For one long, impossible moment, he was not looking at Luna at all. He was looking at Sophia. And Sophia had been dead for 7 years. The fire had burned down to coals when Vincent finally stepped back from the sleeping child. The blanket still lay folded across his hands. He could not bring himself to put it down. He sat in the leather chair across from her and let the past come for him. 7 years ago, he had been 29. Younger then, sharper edges, fewer lines around the eyes. He had only just inherited his role from his father after Don Castellano's first stroke. Sophia had been 25, 3 years younger than Vincent, but in many ways older. She had been the only Castellano who laughed at the dinner table, the only one who refused to wear black, the only one who kept fresh flowers on her windowsill in a house that smelled of cigars and gun oil. Sophia had been pregnant that winter, and the father had been Adrian Vega. The Vegas were not just enemies. They were the reason Vincent had attended his first funeral at the age of 9. There were rules in this world, written into blood and silence, and Sophia had broken every single one of them by falling in love with that man. The night she told their father, Don Castellano had risen from his chair so slowly it had frightened Vincent more than any shouting could. The old man had only said one sentence: "You walk out that door, you don't come back." Sophia had walked out. She did not even pack a bag. She left wearing her coat over her nightdress, one small silver butterfly necklace clasped around her throat, and Vincent had stood at the top of the stairs unable to call her back. He had been the new boss. He had 1,000 men under him, and he had not been able to save his own sister from the rules of his own house. Sophia and Adrian disappeared somewhere into Vermont. They lived quietly. A small house with round windows and a wooden balcony, the kind of house Sophia had drawn in her notebook as a child. She gave birth there in the spring. A girl, Vincent had heard through whispers. He never saw the baby. He never even saw a photograph. 6 months later, Sophia was dead. The official report called it a robbery gone wrong, a car ambushed on a back road outside Burlington. Adrian had taken 3 bullets in the chest. Sophia had taken one through the throat. By the time the police arrived at the scene, the infant had been gone. The car seat sat empty in the back, straps cut clean. Vincent had spent 2 years tearing the country apart looking for that child. Private investigators, bribed clerks, hospitals from Maine to Florida, every adoption agency, every child welfare database he could buy his way into. Nothing. The trail ended at a county road covered in his sister's blood. After 2 years, the search had broken something inside him. He stopped asking. He stopped hoping. He decided the baby was dead, and that someone, somewhere, had buried her in an unmarked grave he would never find. It was the only thing that let him sleep. He had carried that grave inside his chest ever since. He had built walls around it. He had become the cold thing the city now feared. And now, in front of a dying fire, a small girl was breathing softly under a wool blanket 8 feet away from him. Her dark hair was the same shade. Her lashes curved the same way. Her cheek, in the firelight, was the cheek of a sister he had buried in a closed casket because there had been too little left to show. 7 years old. She was exactly the age that Sophia's child would have been. Vincent closed his eyes and forced himself to breathe. It was impossible. The world did not work that way. Coincidence did not arrive in Manhattan alleys wrapped in old cloth. Children did not return from the dead. He was tired. He had not slept in 2 nights. He was a man hunting Victor Hale through a fog of fear and old guilt, and he was seeing what he wanted to see in the face of a hungry stranger. He opened his eyes. Luna stirred in her sleep. Her small hand turned upward on the rug, as if reaching for something only her dreams could see. Vincent stood, walked over, and laid the blanket gently across her shoulders. He told himself, very firmly, that it was a coincidence, but somewhere behind his ribs, in the place where instinct lived and never lied, something very old whispered back that it was not. The next 2 days settled into a fragile, watchful rhythm. The estate had armed men at every window now. Vincent worked from the study with the door open, so he could hear Luna laugh at the small things she discovered. A bowl of fresh strawberries, the weight of a real winter coat that fit her properly, the fact that the bath water in this house came out warm without being boiled first. She was beginning to trust him, not all at once, in small, careful pieces. On the 3rd afternoon, Bella came down from upstairs with a stack of crayons and a sketch pad she had picked up from a shop in town. Luna sat by the tall window of the sunroom, her legs tucked under her, drawing with the quiet intensity of a child who had not held real crayons in a long time. Vincent watched her from across the room. He pretended to read a folder of shipping reports. He turned a page every few minutes for show. His eyes kept drifting back to the small figure at the window. After almost an hour, Luna slid down from the chair and walked over with the sketch pad pressed shyly against her chest. "I made you something," she said. She held it out to him. Vincent took it. For a moment he could not breathe. The page showed a house, a small 2-story house with a wooden balcony and round windows, set against a backdrop of dark green pine trees. Crooked white smoke curled from a stone chimney. Yellow flowers sat in a row of pots along the railing. The roof was slate gray. The front door was painted blue. He knew that house. He had seen photographs of it exactly twice in his life. Both had been in a private investigator's folder. The house in Vermont where Sophia had lived with Adrian Vega. The house where his sister had given birth and, 6 months later, kissed her baby goodbye for the last time. Vincent kept his face very still. "Luna," he said carefully, "this is a beautiful house. Have you ever lived in a place like this?" She shook her head. "Has Sounid ever visited one?" Another shake. "Then how did you draw it?" Luna shrugged in the way only small children can. "I see it sometimes. When I close my eyes." He nodded slowly. He turned the page sideways as if studying the proportions, mostly to give his hand something to do. That was when he saw it. The drawing was not the only thing. The collar of Luna's sweater had shifted while she leaned over to hand him the sketch, and a small chain had slipped free against her throat. At the end of it hung a tiny pendant, tarnished silver, slightly bent on one wing, a butterfly. Vincent's hand froze over the page. He had bought that necklace himself. For Sophia's 20th birthday, from a jeweler on 47th Street. He had watched the man engrave a single S on the underside of the right wing. Sophia had worn it every single day until the morning she walked out of the Castellano house. It had not been on her body when they brought her home in a closed casket. He reached out, very gently, and lifted the small pendant on the tip of one finger. The metal was warm from the child's skin. He turned it over, just enough to see the underside of the right wing. A small, hand-engraved S. The room tilted around him. He set the pendant back against her chest with a steadiness that cost him everything he had. "That's a pretty necklace, sweetheart," he said softly. "Where did you get it?" "Mommy gave it to me," Luna said. "She said it was from someone who loved us very much. She told me to never lose it." Vincent kept his voice level. "What was your mommy's name, Luna?" She thought for a moment. Her brow tightened the way it did when she was being careful. "She told me to never say her real name out loud." "Then don't say it. Just nod." "Was it a long name?" A small nod. "Did it start with an E?" A pause. A nod. Vincent set the sketch pad down on his knee. "Thank you for showing me your drawing," he said. "It's the best one I've ever seen." Luna smiled and ran back to the window. The moment her back was turned, Vincent rose, walked into the hall, and quietly intercepted Bella outside the kitchen. "I need a buccal swab from the girl," he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Tonight. Discreetly. While she's brushing her teeth. Run it against the sample I gave you 3 years ago. The one from Sophia's hairbrush." Bella did not blink. "Yes, boss." He turned back toward the sunroom and almost walked straight into Raphael Cruz. Raphael was leaning casually against the door frame, a glass of water in his hand, his eyes calm. Too calm. "Boss," he said pleasantly. "Any progress on the investigation? Has Marcus turned up anything useful yet about our little guests?" Vincent looked at him for a long moment. He did not answer. He simply walked past. And he understood, with a quiet, cold certainty, that he was going to have to start watching Raphael the same way he watched his enemies. That night, after Luna had been tucked into bed beside the cradle, and the lights in the upstairs hall had been dimmed, Bella came down the long staircase carrying a small folder. Her face was set in the particular kind of stillness she only wore when something did not add up. She found Vincent in the study, standing by the window, looking out at the snow-covered driveway and the 2 new vehicles parked along the perimeter wall. "Close the door," he said without turning around. She did. Then she stepped to the desk and opened the folder. "It's about the baby," Bella said. Vincent finally turned. "He's healthy," she said. "That's the first thing that doesn't fit. Far too healthy. When you brought him in, his core temperature was low and he was a little dehydrated. Yes, but everything else about him is wrong for the story we were given." She laid out a series of notes on the desk in neat lines. Children abandoned to the streets in winter look a certain way, Vincent. Their skin shows it, their weight shows it, their muscle tone, their hydration patterns, the inside of their mouths. I've worked with kids like that. I know what neglect looks like. She tapped the page. This baby has none of it. He's been bottle-fed on schedule, probably every 3 hours. His skin is clean. His diaper rash is minimal. His nails were trimmed, recently and carefully, by someone who knew what they were doing. There's no untreated cradle cap, no signs of long-term cold exposure. She paused. And this is the part I want you to hear clearly. There were traces of medical alcohol on the inside of his elbow. Fresh. The kind a clinic uses to swab a vein before drawing blood or starting an IV. Within the last 48 hours, Vincent's hand tightened on the back of the chair in front of him. He was in someone's care, Bella said quietly. A real one. Up until just a few hours before you found him in that alley. The room went very still. Vincent stared down at the notes without seeing them. The shape of it formed in his mind in a single, clean piece. He had been looking at it from the wrong angle the entire time. A real abandoned baby would not have lasted long enough to be found alive in those temperatures. But this baby had been cared for, kept warm, kept fed, right up until someone placed him into the arms of a 7-year-old in a Manhattan alley behind a restaurant where Vincent Castellano was known to walk after meetings. The baby had not been left there to be saved. The baby had been left there to anchor Luna in place. A small child alone could run. A small child alone could disappear into the night the way she had disappeared from every search Victor Hale had run. But a child holding a fragile infant could not run. A child holding a baby would stand still in the cold, even if it killed her, because she had been told to protect him. Someone had known Luna. Someone had known exactly what she would do if she were given an infant to care for. Someone had used the only thing more powerful than her instinct for survival, her instinct to protect, and someone had known where Vincent walked at 11 at night. He felt the air in the room thin to nothing. "Bella," he said, "has anyone else seen these notes?" "No one. Just me. Burn them. Tonight. And keep checking him. Quietly. I want to know if anything else surfaces." She nodded once and gathered the pages back into the folder. A small voice came from the doorway. "Mr. Vincent?" Both adults turned. Luna stood there in pajamas 2 sizes too large, her hair sleep-tangled, her bare feet on the cold marble floor. She was watching him with a careful, searching look. "Why are you looking at Elias funny when you talk about him?" she asked. Vincent crossed to her in 3 long steps. He knelt down, gently, and put one hand on her thin shoulder. "It's nothing, sweetheart," he said. His voice was as soft as he knew how to make it. "He's perfectly fine. I promise." Luna studied his face the way she always did. Carefully, slowly. She nodded, accepted the answer, and let him guide her back upstairs by the hand. But long after she had fallen asleep again beside the crib, Vincent stood in the dark hallway with one cold realization sitting heavy in his chest. The game had not started in that alley. The game had started long before he ever saw Luna's face. Someone had been moving these pieces toward him for weeks, maybe longer, and they had known he would pick the children up. Before sunrise, Vincent moved them. He told no one in advance. The order to load the cars went out at 4 in the morning. 2 black SUVs left through the rear service gate, headlights off until they reached the highway. Tomas drove the lead car. Vincent rode in the back with Luna pressed against his side, Elias asleep in a portable cradle at their feet. The Hudson Valley safe house sat on 20 acres of pine forest north of Cold Spring. A modest stone lodge, 2 stories, no neighbors within a mile. The Castellanos had owned it under a shell company since before Vincent was born. Only 3 people outside the immediate family knew it existed. Marcus had been told that morning. Bella had been told because she was bringing supplies. Raphael had been told because Raphael was still officially Vincent's right hand, and removing him from the loop would have raised suspicions Vincent was not ready to raise. They arrived as the first light touched the trees. Luna walked into the lodge holding Vincent's hand. She did not ask where they were going. She did not ask why. She had stopped asking those questions long before he had met her. Bella had stocked the upstairs bedroom with everything the children needed. Vincent settled them in by lunchtime, walked the perimeter twice himself, and posted 4 men in the woods at staggered points. By nightfall, the house was as locked down as anything he could build on short notice. He thought, foolishly, that they would have one quiet night. He was wrong. It was just past 2 in the morning when the screaming started. Vincent was already half awake, sitting in the armchair across from the children's door, when Luna's voice tore through the silence of the lodge. Not crying, screaming. A high, raw, terrible sound. "Mama, Mama." He was through the door in seconds. She was sitting bolt upright in the bed, eyes wide and unseeing, fists clenched in the sheets. Elias had begun to cry in the cradle beside her. Vincent crossed the room in 2 strides, sat on the edge of the bed, and pulled her into his arms. "You're safe," he said. "You're safe, sweetheart. I'm here." She clung to him as if she were drowning. Her small body shook against his chest. He did not know where the song came from. It rose out of him before he could choose it. The words were Italian, half remembered from a childhood that felt centuries away. The lullaby his own mother had once sung to Sophia in this same hour of the night when bad dreams came. He sang it low against the top of her head. Halfway through the 2nd verse, Luna went very, very still. She pulled back just enough to look up at him. Her face was wet. Her dark eyes were impossibly wide. "I know that song," she whispered. Vincent's voice failed. "My mommy used to sing it," Luna said. "The same words. Exactly the same. How do you know my mommy's song?" He could not answer. He held her tighter and pretended he was steady, while every wall inside him quietly collapsed. She fell back asleep against his chest 20 minutes later. He laid her down with shaking hands and stood beside the bed for a long time, just watching her breathe. The first explosion came at 4:17. A flash of orange light from the southern tree line. One of the perimeter men's positions was gone in a single thunderclap. Then the gunfire began. Not the ragged, undisciplined shooting of the first attack at the estate. This was different. Suppressed weapons. Synchronized fire. 5 men, moving in trained formation through the snow. Marcus hit the side door at the same moment Vincent reached the stairs. They had already worked out the angles between them. Vincent took Luna and Elias straight into the cellar, locked them behind the steel inner door, and came back up with a rifle in his hands. The next 8 minutes were teeth and smoke and muzzle flashes between the pines. Marcus moved like the cop he had once been. Vincent moved like the boss he had become. 4 bodies dropped in the snow before the 5th man tried to break west into the woods. Marcus's bullet caught him in the thigh and brought him down screaming. By the time the sun came up, the only sound was a wounded man bleeding into the snow and Tomas binding his hands with zip ties. Vincent crouched beside the survivor and pulled the phone from his jacket pocket. He did not need to crack the password. The screen was still unlocked. The last message sent had gone out at 3:11 in the morning, 4 minutes before the explosion. It read only 6 words. "All in position. Lights out soon." The number it had been sent to had no name attached, just digits. But Vincent recognized the area code. 718, the Bronx. The same exchange that ran through the back rooms and warehouses Raphael Cruz had been frequenting for the last 6 months. Vincent stood up slowly in the cold morning light. He had his first piece of hard evidence. By noon the bodies were gone, the snow was raked clean, and the lodge looked, from the road, as if nothing had happened in the night. Marcus locked himself in the back office with 3 laptops and a stack of paper files he had brought up from a storage unit in Queens. Vincent did not interrupt him. The Castellano men kept the perimeter walking. Bella stayed with Luna upstairs, painting watercolors at the window. Elias slept in his cradle. It was almost 6 in the evening when Marcus knocked once on the office door and stepped into the small library where Vincent was waiting. He set a folder down on the table between them. "You're not going to like any of this," Marcus said. Vincent gestured for him to sit. "Tell me everything." Marcus opened the folder. "I started with the phone number from the Bronx," he said. "Burner. But I traced the device's pattern to a tower the device hits every Tuesday and Thursday between 9 and 11 at night. Same neighborhood, same warehouse complex on Webster Avenue. And the man who has run that complex for the last 7 years, under 3 different shell companies, is a contractor named Hector Salas." He paused. "Hector Salas works for Raphael Cruz. Has since 2015. Vincent's face did not move. Marcus turned the page. "I went deeper. Raphael's official finances are clean. Too clean. So I pulled every offshore filing I could find that bumps against any of his known aliases. I found something in the Caymans. An account opened 7 years ago, registered under a holding company in Belize that traces back through 3 layers to a name Raphael has used twice on real estate transactions." Marcus pushed a printout across the table. "The account has been receiving steady deposits since the same week your sister died, Vincent. Same week. 6 figures a quarter, every quarter, for 7 years. The original wire came from a corporate channel I have linked, through a separate investigation, to Hale Industries." The whiskey decanter sat on the sideboard. Vincent rose, poured 1 glass, and did not drink it. He just stared at the amber liquid trembling slightly in his hand. "Keep going," he said. "I went back to before he joined your family," Marcus said quietly. "Before Raphael Cruz was your right hand. He ran security for a smaller crew out of Newark. The crew was loosely allied with Adrian Vega." Vincent set the glass down. "He worked for Vega? For almost 3 years. He was on Adrian's personal protection detail when your sister and Adrian first met. He saw her every time she came to that house. Every dinner. Every weekend. He drove her car twice." Marcus took a slow breath. "He wasn't transferred to your family by accident, Vincent. He requested it. 6 months after Sophia and Adrian went into hiding, he came to your father's people offering loyalty and information. He was placed under you. You were 29. You trusted him." Vincent's hand closed slowly into a fist. "The robbery on the Vermont road," Marcus continued. "I always thought it was clean, wet work. Professional shooters, well placed. But I never had the angle. I have it now." Raphael fed Adrian's location to Victor Hale. Hale's people pulled the trigger. "Vega and your sister died exactly where Raphael told them to be." Vincent's voice came out low. "And the baby." Marcus closed the folder. "The baby was not killed at the scene. The car seat was cut, not torn. Whoever lifted that infant was careful. And whoever lifted that infant was working for the same man who arranged the ambush." He looked Vincent in the eye. "Raphael did not let Sophia's child die that day. He swapped her. He moved her. He buried her trail under another name, and then he came home and shook your hand and told you he was sorry for your loss." The whiskey glass shattered against the fireplace. Vincent had not consciously decided to throw it. The sound of broken crystal was the first thing that brought him back into his own body. He stood there breathing hard, his shoulders rising and falling, his hands trembling with a rage that had been sleeping inside him for 7 years and had just woken up screaming. Marcus said nothing. He let the man feel it. After a long minute, Vincent walked silently out of the library, up the stairs, down the hallway. He pushed open the door of the children's room without making a sound. Luna was asleep on her side. One small hand rested on the wooden rail of Elias's cradle, even in sleep. The silver butterfly pendant had slipped to the side of her throat and caught the soft light from the lamp. Vincent stood in the doorway for a long time. He did not fight it anymore. The thing he had pushed away by the fire 2 nights ago. The thing he had refused to believe in the sunroom when he saw the drawing of his sister's house. The thing his bones had been telling him since the moment he first looked into those eyes in the alley behind Don Marco's. It was not a coincidence. It had never been a coincidence. Luna was Sophia's daughter. Luna was his blood. Bella arrived just before midnight. She had driven up from the city in her own car, alone, with a sealed envelope inside her coat. The lab she used was private, off-record, the kind of place where doctors with debts ran tests that never showed up in any system. Vincent had used them once before. He had paid them well enough to forget his name. She found him in the library where Marcus had left him hours earlier. The fire had burned low again. The shattered whiskey glass was still on the hearth. Vincent had not bothered to pick it up. "Bella," he said. His voice was hoarse. She did not say anything. She placed the envelope on the table between them and stepped back. He stared at it for almost a full minute before he reached for it. His hands were not steady. The man who had ordered executions without flinching, who had walked into rival meetings unarmed and walked out alone, could not get his fingers to work properly on a paper seal. He tore it crooked. The single sheet inside slid out and lay flat on the table. Bella spoke softly. "I matched the swab against your sister's sample first, as you asked. The relationship is confirmed at the maternal line, but the percentages came back higher than expected for an aunt and a niece. So I ran the second comparison without telling you. Against your blood draw from last year." Vincent's eyes did not leave the page. "Vincent," Bella said gently, "she is not your niece." He read the line under his finger. Probability of paternity, 99.98%. The room went silent in a way silence rarely was. Even the fire seemed to stop crackling. Even the wind outside the lodge windows held its breath. Bella stepped closer, just enough to put a hand on his shoulder. "Luna is your daughter." The word landed somewhere very far below his ribs and stayed there. He did not move. He did not breathe. He stared at the paper and felt the past 8 years rearrange themselves around him, like furniture being shoved across a floor by invisible hands. 8 years ago. A small jazz club in the West Village. A singer with dark hair and a voice that could stop a room. Elena Rivera, 25 years old, Cuban, fierce, kind, the only woman Vincent had ever brought home twice. They had been together for 3 months. He had been falling, slowly, for the first time in his life. She had been pregnant and had not yet told him. And then, one Tuesday in February, she had simply vanished. Her apartment was empty. Her phone was dead. Her family had no idea where she had gone. The club manager said she had quit by note, no forwarding address. Vincent had spent 6 weeks trying to find her, and then his pride had risen up like a wall and told him she had run from him because of who he was, because of what his name meant, and that he should let her go. He had let her go. He had buried that name with all the rest. Now, in front of a dying fire, the truth pulled itself together inside his head with brutal clarity. Elena had not run from him. Raphael had taken her. Raphael had needed leverage over the Castellanos for years, and one night, 8 years ago, he had seen Vincent come home with a singer on his arm, and had decided that was leverage enough. He had taken Elena off a city street one cold morning, and locked her somewhere quiet, and there she had given birth to a daughter while the world told Vincent she had abandoned him. Sophia. Sophia had found out somehow. Sophia had always been the one who paid attention. Sophia had pulled Elena and the baby out of whatever dark room Raphael had kept them in, and instead of bringing the child home to Vincent, she had hidden Luna with herself. Because Sophia had already been pregnant with Adrian's child, and already running from the family. Sophia had taken her brother's daughter and her own unborn child into the same small house in Vermont, and tried to raise them together, in safety, until she could bring everyone home alive. Sophia had died for that decision, and the child who had survived in Vermont, the child Raphael's people had lifted out of that bloody car seat 7 years ago, had been Luna, Vincent's daughter, his own. For 7 years, while he sat in this house drinking himself into rooms full of ghosts, his child had been alive, passed from hand to hand, used, hidden, hungry, shoved into the snow with another baby in her arms as bait for a man who had not even known her name. His knees gave. He did not feel himself going down. He felt the floor against his palms before he understood he had hit it. A sound came out of him that he had never made before, not at his sister's funeral, not at his mother's bedside. Bella crouched beside him in silence and let him break. He stayed on that floor for a long time. When he finally rose, his face was wet and his breathing was ragged, but his eyes had changed. He walked to the door, looked up the stairs toward the room where his daughter lay sleeping, and spoke a single sentence into the empty hallway. "No one," Vincent said quietly, "is ever going to lay a hand on that little girl again." Morning came pale and slow over the Hudson Valley. Luna woke to the smell of pancakes. She padded down the stairs in her oversized pajamas, hair sticking up on one side, and found Vincent in the kitchen wearing a dark sweater, sleeves pushed up to his elbows, flipping batter in a cast-iron pan as if he had done it 100 times before. He had not. He had gotten up at 6, asked Bella how, and practiced quietly until the first 3 came out edible. He turned when he heard her on the bottom step. "Good morning, sweetheart." She blinked at him. Something in his face was different today, softer. The cold edges that had always lived just behind his eyes had been set aside, like a coat hung up at the door. "You made breakfast?" she said carefully. "I tried to. We'll find out together." She climbed onto the stool at the island, and he set a plate in front of her. 3 small pancakes, blueberries arranged in the shape of a smile, a cup of warm milk on the side. Luna stared at the plate. Then she stared at him. "Did you make the face on purpose?" "Yes." A small giggle escaped her before she could catch it. It was not loud. It was not long. But it was a real laugh, the first one this lodge had ever heard, and it landed in Vincent's chest like something he had been waiting a lifetime to feel. He sat across from her with his own coffee and watched her eat. "Luna," he said after a while, "do you know how to make a paper airplane?" She shook her head, mouth full. "Then today I'm going to teach you." He pulled a stack of plain white paper from the drawer behind him. He had asked Bella to leave it there last night. He took the top sheet, folded it in half, then again, and showed her each crease one slow movement at a time. His hands remembered. He had taught his sister these same folds when Sophia was 8 years old, sitting at the kitchen table of the old Castellano brownstone on a Sunday afternoon, both of them in trouble for something neither of them remembered now. Luna leaned over the counter, watching every move. He gave her a sheet of her own. Her small fingers fumbled the first fold. He guided her gently, his large hand barely touching hers, just enough to angle the paper. Like that? Just like that. When her plane was finished, she held it up reverently in both hands, as if it were something precious that might fly away. He showed her how to throw it. She missed twice. The third time, the plane sailed across the kitchen. looped once near the window, and landed neatly on top of the fruit bowl. She laughed again, louder this time. "Did you see that? Did you see, Mr. Vincent? Did you see how far it went?" "I saw." She made another, and another. By the time the plates were cleared, there were 6 paper airplanes on the kitchen floor, and one little girl with flour on her cheek, from where she had pushed her hair back with sticky fingers. She paused mid-throw and looked at him, suddenly serious in the way only small children can become. "Mr. Vincent?" "Yes, sweetheart. Why are you so nice to me?" The question caught him in the throat. He came around the island and crouched down beside her stool, so they were at the same height. He took both of her small hands inside one of his. "Because you're special, Luna," he said quietly. "More than you know. More than I can tell you yet." She studied his face for a long moment. She did not ask what he meant. She just nodded, the way she nodded at things grown-ups said when she had decided to trust them. Then she reached into the pocket of her pajamas and took out the small leather notebook. She held it out to him with both hands. "I want you to keep it," she said. "You're better at hiding secrets than I am." He took it carefully. "Are you sure?" "Yes. Mommy said only give it to someone who would never lose it. I think that's you." He opened the notebook on the counter beside her. He had only ever looked at the 3rd page before, the page with the numbers. Now he turned the others, slowly, one at a time. Drawings, dozens of them. A house with round windows. A woman with dark hair and a kind smile. A small silver butterfly. The page with the bloody numbers, copied in shaky crayon. And, scattered through the pages, again and again, in different colors, in different sizes, the same figure, a tall man, in a long black coat, standing in shadow. Sometimes he was at the edge of a forest. Sometimes he was at the end of a long hallway. Once he stood in a snowy alley. She had been drawing him for a long time. Vincent's voice did not come out for a moment. "Who is this man, Luna?" "I don't know his name," she said. "I see him in my dreams. Mommy used to say he was the one who would find me one day. She said when he came I would know him." She looked up at Vincent with serious dark eyes. I think she was right. He turned his face away then, very quickly, on the pretense of reaching for a napkin. He needed her not to see his eyes. That night, when bedtime came, Luna took his hand at the bottom of the stairs and did not let go all the way up. She held on as he tucked her in. She held on as he turned out the light. She only let go when she had finally fallen asleep. Her small fingers curled around 2 of his, like she had been waiting her whole short life to find a hand that would not pull away. The next morning, Vincent moved them again, but this time east instead of north. He took Luna and Elias to the old Castellano brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, the original family house, the one his grandfather had bought in 1952 with cash he never explained. It was the most heavily guarded property the family owned. It was also the only place left in this world where his father still lived. Don Castellano had not left that house in almost 2 years. Bella came with them. Marcus drove the second car. Raphael was deliberately not informed. Luna held Vincent's hand as they walked up the worn marble steps. She had never seen a building like it from the inside. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, oil paintings of men she did not recognize, the smell of cigars that had been smoked there 50 winters ago and somehow lingered in the curtains. She slowed near the door of the front parlor, suddenly shy, pressing closer to his leg. "It's all right," he said quietly. "There's someone I want you to meet. He's old. Sometimes he sounds gruff, but he's family." She nodded once. She did not let go of his hand. He left her in the hallway with Bella, and walked into the parlor alone first. Don Castellano sat by the window in his wheelchair, a wool blanket across his knees. 70 years old now, white hair combed straight back. His shoulders had narrowed in the last decade, but the eyes had not. The eyes were still the eyes that had stared down 4 federal indictments and outlived 3 rival bosses. "Sit down, Vincent," the old man said before his son had even reached the chair. Vincent sat across from him. Then he told him, all of it, the alley, the numbers, Daniel Webb, Iron Vault, the watch from Hale's man, the drawing of the house in Vermont, the butterfly pendant, the lullaby in the dark hallway of the safe house, the traces of medical alcohol on a baby's arm, the Cayman account, Newark, before he wore the Castellano ring, Elena Rivera, 8 years gone, Sophia, 7 years dead, the DNA report on the table at the lodge. He did not soften any of it. His father had never accepted anything softened in his life. When Vincent finished, Don Castellano did not speak for a very long time. The old man's hands rested on the arms of the wheelchair. They began to tremble. Not the tremor of age, something else. And then, in the slow gray light of the front parlor, Vincent watched his father weep. It was almost silent. A few tears, no more, sliding down a face that had not allowed itself the luxury in 50 years. Vincent had stood beside his father at his sister's funeral, and the old man's eyes had been dry. He had stood beside his father at his mother's bedside, and the old man's eyes had been dry. Vincent did not have a memory anywhere in his life of seeing this. Don Castellano lifted one trembling hand and dragged it across his cheek. "She is a Castellano," he said. His voice was rough as gravel. "She is our blood. She is in this house. She comes home." He looked up at his son. There was something fierce in those wet old eyes now. "Bring her in. I want to see her face." Vincent rose and went to the doorway. He held out his hand. Luna walked across the room slowly, her small dress swinging at her knees, her dark hair brushed neat. She stopped a few feet from the old man and looked up at him without speaking. Don Castellano studied her for a full half-minute. The old man's mouth worked, as if searching for something. Then he held out one shaking hand, palm up. "Come closer, child." She glanced at Vincent. Vincent nodded. She stepped forward. The old man laid his rough, spotted hand against her cheek with a tenderness no one in that household had seen from him in decades. He looked at her bone structure, the shape of her mouth, the bridge of her small nose. He let out a soft, broken sound. "Sophia," he whispered. "My God, she has Sophia's chin." Then, with effort, he opened his arms. Luna hesitated only a second before stepping into them. Vincent watched his daughter be folded, slowly and carefully, against the chest of the old man whose word had once moved half of New York. Don Castellano reached into the pocket of his cardigan with his free hand. He drew out a small ring. Gold, simple, set with a single chip of dark red stone. The Castellano daughter's ring. Sophia had worn it once. His own mother had worn it before her. 3 generations of Castellano women had carried it on a chain around their necks, until Sophia had been buried without it because no one had been able to find it. He pressed it gently into Luna's small palm and closed her fingers around it. "It's yours, little one," he said. "It has always been yours." Vincent had to look at the floor for a moment. When he raised his eyes again, his father was watching him over the top of Luna's dark head. The tears were gone now. The old man's gaze had hardened back into the iron Vincent had grown up under. "Use everything we have, Vincent," Don Castellano said. "Every man, every favor, every gun in this family." His voice dropped into a sound Vincent had not heard in 20 years. "And finish Raphael. He betrayed 3 generations of this house. He does not see another sunrise." Vincent walked back into his Long Island estate the next morning, wearing the same face he had worn for the past 10 years. The cold one. The one his men had learned to read for orders and not for feelings. Raphael Cruz was waiting in the foyer with 2 cups of fresh espresso on a silver tray. "Boss," Raphael said warmly. "You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't." Raphael handed him a cup. Vincent took it. Their hands brushed for half a second. He did not let his face change. He drank the espresso. He thanked Raphael. He walked into the study. He shut the door. He set the cup down very gently on the desk so that the porcelain would not crack from the pressure of his fingers. The performance had begun. For the next 36 hours, Vincent did everything a worried boss would do. He paced. He yelled at men over the phone. He demanded reports. He pretended Marcus was running cold. He pretended Bella had nothing new on the baby. He even pretended, when Raphael asked, that he was beginning to wonder if the children were worth the trouble after all. Raphael's eyes lit up at that last sentence, just for an instant before he masked it. Vincent caught it. Vincent filed it away. On the 3rd afternoon, Vincent called a meeting of his inner circle. 6 men in the formal dining room. Coffee, cigars, low voices. He laid out the situation. The estate had been hit twice. The lodge had been hit once. The children could not stay in any location the family had ever used. He told them he had decided to move Luna and Elias one final time, to a property no one in the family had touched in over a decade. Then he gave them each a different destination. To his head of security, he named a safe house in upstate New York. To his accountant, he named a property in northern New Jersey. To his second cousin, he named an apartment in Queens. To Tomas, he named a cabin in the Berkshires. To his lawyer, he named a hotel suite in Manhattan. To Raphael, alone, in the privacy of the study afterward, he named a small house outside Hartford, Connecticut. He showed Raphael the address on a printed map. He even said, with just the right edge of nervous trust, Friday night, after midnight. I'll bring her myself. Only you know. Raphael nodded gravely. Of course, boss. No one hears it from me. Vincent put a hand on his shoulder. You're the only one I trust with this, Raphael. The lie tasted like rust on his tongue. Raphael did not notice. Or if he did, he chose not to. That night, while Raphael was reportedly out at a restaurant in the Bronx, Vincent slipped Luna and Elias out the back of the brownstone in a delivery van marked with the name of a flower shop. Marcus was at the wheel. Bella sat in the back with the children. They drove for 45 minutes and stopped in front of an unremarkable building on a quiet block in Cobble Hill, Brooklyn. The third-floor apartment belonged to no one. Officially, Marcus had bought it years ago through a chain of paper companies he had set up, specifically so that no department in the city could ever find him. It had 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, a fire escape, and 3 exits. It was where he had once planned to retire if the badge ever truly got him killed. Now it became the safest hiding place in New York. For the next 48 hours, Marcus stayed with Luna and Elias inside that apartment. He cooked simple meals on the small stove. He read picture books out loud in his rough cop voice. He let Luna braid sections of his graying hair while he pretended to be terribly inconvenienced. Elias slept long stretches in the cradle by the window. On the second night, as Marcus tucked her in, Luna looked up at him and asked, very quietly, "Mr. Marcus, is he coming back?" Marcus did not need to ask who. "Always," he said. "You listen to me, kid. That man would walk through fire for you. Whatever happens out there, he is coming back for you. You believe me?" She nodded, slowly, eyes searching his face. "Yes." He turned out the light. Across the river, in a black SUV parked behind a row of pines outside Hartford, Vincent Castellano sat in the passenger seat checking the slide on a pistol he had not personally carried in almost 5 years. The weight of it felt strange in his hand and also, somehow, exactly right. Around him, 20 Castellano men were already in the woods, dug in along the tree line and the back hedges of the small Connecticut house. The lights inside the house were on. A silhouette moved past the upstairs window every few minutes, on schedule. It looked, from the road, exactly like a frightened man trying to keep 2 small children safe. It was, in fact, 2 of his soldiers in the right kind of clothes. At 11:43 on Friday night, the first headlights cut through the trees at the bottom of the long gravel drive. 3 vehicles, no license plates, headlights doused as they coasted closer. A radio in Vincent's hand crackled once. "Boss," a voice said quietly. "We have movement. 12 men, maybe more. Lead vehicle is Hale himself." Confirmed visual. Vincent's jaw tightened. The trap had sprung. Vincent did not give the order yet. He let the SUVs come closer. He let them stop at the edge of the drive. He let Victor Hale himself step out of the lead vehicle and walk a few paces forward, because Vincent wanted to see his face. Hale was tall, gray-haired, 50 years old, a black wool coat buttoned to the throat. He stood for a moment looking at the small house with its warm yellow windows, like a man admiring a painting he was about to take off the wall. 11 shadows fanned out from the cars behind him in a practiced arc, weapons drawn, moving across the snow toward the front porch. When the lead shooter set foot on the gravel of the front path, Vincent finally lifted the radio. Now. The night exploded. The first 3 Hale men dropped before they registered the sound. Castellano rifles opened up from the tree line in 3 crossing arcs, exactly as Vincent had walked the angles that afternoon. Glass shattered in the windows of the lead SUV. A second shooter spun and fell. The element of surprise lasted perhaps 4 seconds, and then Hale's men, who were professionals, dove for cover behind their vehicles, and the stone planters lining the path. The firefight became a real one. Tracer rounds carved bright lines across the dark snow. The wooden columns of the porch began to splinter. Vincent moved out of the tree line in a low crouch, pistol up, his men advancing in pairs on either side of him. Tomas covered his right. A young soldier named Gennaro covered his left. They worked their way along the hedge while bullets tore the air above their heads. In the woods to the west, Victor Hale was shouting orders. He was beginning to understand. The house was wrong. Too quiet. Too still. The shadows moving past the upstairs window should have panicked by now. The truth landed on him in a single brutal moment. There were no children in this house. There had never been children in this house. He turned on his heel, his eyes wild with rage, and roared into the trees. "Raphael, you son of a bitch. You set me up." The The name carried across the clearing. Vincent heard it from his crouch behind the hedge. He had been waiting to hear it. A figure stepped out from behind the second SUV. It was not one of Hale's expected shooters. It was not a face Hale had counted in his column. Raphael Cruz stood in the snow, with a long-barreled pistol in his hand, his coat collar turned up against the wind, his expression utterly calm. He had been riding with Hale's strike team. He had not come to support Vincent. He had not come to support Hale either. He had come for himself. Vincent stared at him through a gap in the hedge and felt something inside his chest go very cold and very clear. Raphael raised the pistol and fired 3 times into Hale's nearest bodyguard, dropping him into the snow without warning. Hale spun toward him in shock, drawing his own weapon. Raphael pivoted and drove the second SUV between them as cover, then sprinted across the open ground toward the house, weaving between Castellano fire and Hale fire, as if he had memorized exactly where every shooter stood, because he had. He had set up both teams. He had given Vincent the location. He had given Hale the location. He had brought the 2 strongest men who could threaten his rise to power into the same patch of frozen forest, and now he intended to walk out of the trees as the only one left standing. Vincent understood it all in less time than it took to breathe. He came up out of the hedge and ran for the house. A round caught one of the porch lanterns. Sparks rained down onto the dry wreath hanging on the front door. Within seconds, flame licked up the wooden frame and crawled hungrily into the eaves. The fake home Vincent had staged so carefully was beginning to burn. Raphael was already inside. Vincent kicked the side door open and entered after him, weapon raised. Smoke was beginning to roll across the ceiling. The lights flickered. He moved through the kitchen, past the staged dining room, into the wide front parlor where the fire was already chewing at the curtains. Raphael was waiting for him. The 2 men stood 20 feet apart in a room full of growing heat and yellow light. "You knew," Raphael said quietly. His voice was almost amused. "When did you know?" "Long enough," Vincent answered. They fired at the same instant. Vincent felt the round punch through the meat of his left shoulder and spin him half a step backward. The wall behind him bloomed red. He did not go down. He brought his pistol back up and squeezed the trigger twice. The first round missed Raphael's head by inches and shattered a mirror. The second tore through Raphael's right hand. The gun in his fingers fell to the burning rug with a clatter, and Raphael staggered backward into the wall, a strangled sound escaping his throat as he clutched his ruined hand against his chest. The room burned brighter. Vincent took 1 step forward through the smoke, blood running down his sleeve, eyes locked on the man who had stolen 7 years of his life. Raphael looked up, and for the first time in 2 decades of knowing each other, he was the one afraid. The fire climbed the wallpaper behind Raphael like a slow living thing. He slid down the wall an inch at a time until he was half sitting against the baseboard, his ruined right hand cradled in his lap, blood pooling onto the rug. The pistol on the floor beside him had skidded too far away to reach. The gun on Vincent's side was still up, still steady, still aimed at the center of Raphael's chest. Raphael laughed. It was a thin, bitter sound, more breath than voice. "Look at you," he said. "Look at how steady that hand is. The boss again. The animal again." He tilted his head against the wall, smoke curling above him. "I almost forgot what you looked like before that little girl made you soft." Vincent did not move. "Why?" he said. The single word came out low, scraped raw at the edges. 20 years, Raphael. You were my brother. You stood at my mother's grave. You sat at my father's table. Tell me why." Raphael's lips pulled back into something that was not quite a smile. "Because of Sophia." The name hit Vincent in the chest like another bullet. "I loved her," Raphael said. "Long before that Finocchio, Adrian Vega, ever touched her. When I was 25 and she was 19, I asked her once, just once, in the garden behind the Brooklyn house, and she laughed at me, Vincent. Not cruelly. That was the worst part. She laughed kindly, like I was a little boy who had brought her a flower he had picked from a sidewalk crack. She said I was sweet and that I was not for her." His good hand pressed down harder on the wound. His face was going gray. "I waited. I told myself she would change her mind. I served your father. I served your house. I wore your colors. And then she ran off with our enemy. With Vega, the man whose people had killed my cousin in 78. She gave him what she would not give me." His voice rose. "She let him put a child inside her." He coughed, a spray of red on his coat. "So when Hale came to me," Raphael said, "and offered me money to give up where Vega was hiding, I did not even hesitate. I told him. I gave him the road. I gave him the time. I let it happen. Vincent's jaw locked. Sophia was not supposed to be in that car, Raphael said quietly. Hale's men were sloppy. They saw her, they panicked, they shot. I did not order that part. He coughed again. But I will not pretend I cried about it. And Elena, Vincent said. His voice barely sounded like his own. Raphael's eyes lit with something almost proud. That was mine, he said. That was elegant. I watched you fall in love with that singer for 3 months. 3 months. The Vincent Castellano I knew did not fall in love. I knew what it meant before you did. I knew the weight of a child of yours would change the family line. So I took her, Vincent. I lifted her off the corner of Bleecker and Sullivan one Tuesday morning at 5 a.m. She fought. She fought hard. I respected her for it. He smiled. I kept her in a basement in Yonkers for 7 months. She had your daughter on a metal cot. I let her keep the baby. I needed leverage, not a corpse. Vincent's hand began to shake on the grip of the pistol. And Sophia found out, he said. Sophia found out, Raphael agreed. I do not know how. Your sister was always cleverer than any of us gave her credit for. She came in the night and took them. She took your woman and your child and disappeared with Vega into Vermont. Hid them with her own pregnancy. Tried to raise both children together until she could bring them home to you safely. His smile faded into something darker. I could not let that stand. If your daughter ever reached you, my account in the Caymans dried up. My place in your house dried up. Everything I had built dried up. He shrugged with one shoulder. So I told Hale where Sophia was. I let him kill them all. And when his men brought me the baby afterward, I sold her too. I sold your daughter to the same machine that had killed your sister. The fire was very loud now. I wanted you to bleed, Vincent. I wanted you to walk around for 7 years not knowing why you were empty. I wanted you to look at every little girl on the street and never see her. Raphael's voice cracked, finally. I wanted you to hurt the way I hurt the day. Sophia laughed at me. Vincent looked down at him. He did not speak. There were no words left that mattered. He squeezed the trigger. The shot was clean. Raphael's head jerked once against the wall and stilled. His mouth was still curved in that small, vicious smile when his eyes went empty. The fire took the curtains behind him in a soft roar. Vincent turned on his heel and walked back through the smoke toward the front door, blood running warm down the inside of his sleeve. He stepped out onto the porch. And there, at the bottom of the steps, illuminated by the orange light of the burning house, stood Victor Hale, a pistol leveled directly at Vincent's chest. The two men stood in the orange light. The burning house roared behind Vincent. The snow at the bottom of the steps reflected the fire like spilled gold. Victor Hale's hand was steady on his pistol. His coat was streaked with soot, and his nose was bleeding from where he had taken a fall behind one of the SUVs, but his eyes were clear and merciless. You ruined my empire, he said. Vincent did not lower his own weapon. They were at 15 feet, both arms raised, both barrels aimed. Either man could fire and either man would be hit. Vincent had been in this exact geometry before, twice in his life, and both times he had been the one to walk away. You touched my daughter, Vincent said quietly. You died a long time ago. Your body just hasn't caught up yet. Victor laughed. It was not the laugh of a man losing. It was the laugh of a man who knew something his enemy did not. You think this is over? Victor said. You think you walk off this porch and go pick up that little girl and live happily? I am not stupid, Castellano. I followed your van for 2 days before I came to Connecticut. I had eyes on every corner of every borough. I knew you would never use a Castellano property to hide her. I knew you would use someone outside the family. So I followed your friend Marcus. Vincent's blood went cold. 3 of my men are walking up his stairs in Brooklyn right now, Victor said. They will be inside that apartment in about 4 minutes. So even if you put me in the snow tonight, you lose anyway. Your child dies tonight. Your bloodline ends tonight. And the last thing you will see in this life is the body of a 7-year-old girl. Vincent's left hand moved before his face could betray a single thing. He keyed the radio clip to his collar with 2 fast taps. The signal Marcus would recognize. Code red. Apartment compromised. Get Luna out. Across the river, in the small Cobble Hill apartment, Marcus's earpiece chirped twice. He was on his feet in 1 second. He had been reading on the couch, half asleep, a paperback open on his chest. The double chirp meant exactly what he had drilled himself never to forget. He moved without making a sound. Luna was in the back bedroom with Elias, both of them already in pajamas. Marcus crossed the small living room in 3 strides, slipped into the bedroom, and crouched beside her bed. Sweetheart, he whispered. Wake up, quietly. Her eyes opened instantly. She did not ask why. The fear of the past weeks had taught her how to wake. "You take Elias," Marcus said. "You take him into the closet. You sit at the back. You pull the coats over you both. You do not come out no matter what you hear until I say your name. Not Mr. Vincent's name. Mine. Marcus. Do you understand? Yes. Go." She lifted Elias from the cradle in her thin arms and slipped into the closet without a sound. Marcus drew the pistol from the small of his back, switched off the lamp, and stepped into the dark hallway just as the apartment door splintered. 3 men came through fast. Black tactical gear, suppressed weapons, trained. The first man caught Marcus's first round in the throat and went down hard against the wall. The second and third dove behind the kitchen island, returning fire. A round caught the picture frame above Marcus's shoulder. Another grazed his thigh. He felt the burn of it, ignored it, swung wide around the corner of the hallway, and dropped the second shooter with 2 rounds to the chest. The third was the worst of them. Older, calmer. He came up firing. Marcus took one in the side, just below the rib, before he put 2 rounds through the man's forehead at 6 feet. The third body hit the floor. Then there was silence in the apartment, except for the smoke alarm Marcus had not realized was screaming and the distant wail of sirens beginning to crawl up the block. Marcus slid down against the wall with one hand clamped over the wound at his side, breathing hard. "Luna," he called. "It's me, Marcus. Stay where you are. I'm coming." In Connecticut, on the porch of a burning house, Victor Hale's smile faltered when Vincent did not flinch. "You're already too late," Vincent said. Marcus heard the warning. "Your men are dead in that apartment by now. You bet your empire on a 4-minute window and you lost it." Victor's eyes flared with the recognition of a man who had finally understood the size of his miscalculation. He fired. The round slammed into Vincent's right thigh and the leg buckled under him, sending him down onto one knee on the wooden steps. The world went white for a half-second with pain. He fired back from the kneel, 2-handed, before Victor could adjust his aim. The shot was perfect. Victor Hale staggered backward. He looked down once at the dark spreading bloom in the center of his coat, directly over his heart, with an expression that was less anger than mild surprise. Then his knees gave and he fell sideways into the snow. He did not get up. Vincent dragged himself the rest of the way down the porch steps, with one arm clamped against his leg. Smoke rolled across the gravel above him. His own men were running toward him from the trees now, but he did not see them. He fumbled in his coat with bloody fingers and pulled out his phone. He stabbed at the screen until the call connected. "Marcus," he gasped into it. "Marcus, tell me. Luna. Where is Luna?" The helicopter touched down on the rooftop of a private hospital in Lower Manhattan 38 minutes after Vincent placed the call. He refused to be wheeled inside. A field medic strapped a pressure bandage around his thigh in the air, jammed an IV into his arm, and tried to argue with him about the trauma bay waiting downstairs. Vincent did not hear most of it. He only heard the words Marcus had said into the phone in Connecticut, repeated now in his head on a loop. "She is safe. She is in the closet. The men are down. Come." He limped off the helipad on his own legs with a Castellano soldier under each shoulder. They put him into the back of a black sedan idling on the rooftop access ramp. Tomas was at the wheel. They drove across the Brooklyn Bridge in a car that ignored every red light it met. The block in Cobble Hill was already cordoned off when they arrived, but only by Castellano men. Marcus had called the right people. The real police would not be there for another 20 minutes. Vincent half walked, half was carried up the 3 flights of stairs, his shoe filled with blood. He did not feel it. He pushed the apartment door open with his good shoulder. Marcus was on the couch. His shirt was open. A field dressing was tied around his side, and another wrapped his thigh. His face was pale, his lips were dry, but his eyes were clear and his pistol still lay across his lap. 3 covered bodies lined the kitchen floor behind him. "She's okay," Marcus rasped before Vincent could speak. "She's okay. She has not come out yet. I told her only when I called her name." He turned his head toward the back hallway and raised his voice as much as the wound in his side would allow. "Luna, sweetheart, it's all right. You can come out now. Marcus says it's all right." For a long second, nothing. Then a small sound from the bedroom. The closet door creaked open. She stepped into the hallway in her pajamas. Her hair was full of dust from the back of the closet shelf. There was a smudge of something on her cheek. Ilias was in her arms, awake, blinking, but somehow not crying. Her eyes were enormous in her small white face. She saw the man standing in the living room doorway. The blood on his sleeve, the blood on his pant leg, the dressing taped to his shoulder, the way his weight was leaned hard onto the doorframe because the leg under him would not hold him up alone. For 1 second, she did not move. Then she was running. "Mr. Vincent!" She did not stop when she reached him. She crashed into his good leg the way only a child can crash into someone she has been waiting to see, careful only of the baby in her arms. Vincent went down to one knee against the doorframe, so they were the same height. He pulled her in with his good arm and held her against his chest for the first time as the man who knew exactly who she was. She felt smaller than he remembered. She felt warm. She felt real. Bella appeared at his shoulder a moment later and gently lifted Elias from Luna's arms, murmuring something soft, carrying the baby into the kitchen so the little girl could have her hands free. Luna pulled back, just enough to look at him. Her eyes traveled over his shoulder. She lifted one small hand, very carefully, and laid it flat against the bandage there, as if she could feel through cloth and tape and gauze the hurt underneath. "You're hurt," she whispered. "It's nothing, sweetheart. I'm okay. It's all over. All of it? All of it. The bad men are not coming anymore." She studied his face for a long moment with that careful, searching look she always had. Then she leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. He closed his eyes. "It was now or it was never." "Luna," he said, "I have to tell you something. Something very important. I should have told you days ago, but I needed to be sure, and then I was afraid." She did not pull back. She just nodded slightly against his forehead. "I am not your Mr. Vincent," he said. "I am not your uncle, not your friend, not the man who found you in an alley." He took a breath. His voice nearly broke. "I am your father, Luna, your real father, your blood." She did not gasp, she did not pull away, she did not cry. She was quiet for a very long time, and he could hear his own heart counting the seconds against her cheek. When she finally spoke, her voice was small but steady. "I know." He opened his eyes. "You know?" She nodded slowly. "The mommy in my dream told me, the one with the dark hair. She kept saying he is coming. She kept saying you will know him when he comes." She tilted her head up to look at him. "I knew you in the alley. I just didn't know how to say it." His vision blurred. He could not stop it this time. He did not even try. She lifted both her small arms and put them around his neck. She held on tight, tighter than her thin little body should have been able to. And against his ear, in a voice he had spent 7 years not knowing he was waiting for, she whispered the word that broke him and built him back up at the same time. "Dad." 6 months passed. Winter let go of New York the way it always did, slowly, one warm afternoon at a time, until one morning in late April the cherry trees along the drive of the Castellano estate burst into pink overnight, and the windows that had been shuttered against snow now stood open to a soft, sweet wind off the bay. The house sounded different now. It had taken Vincent a long time to understand what the difference was. He realized one Sunday afternoon, standing at the kitchen window with a wooden spoon in his hand, that the difference was laughter, children's laughter, the kind that did not stop, that climbed up the marble staircase and slid down the banister and rolled out through the open French doors into the garden. Luna was 8 years old now. She had grown almost 2 inches in those 6 months. Her cheeks were full. Her hair was longer. Her shoes fit. She was running barefoot through the new grass in a yellow dress while a small, wobbling boy in tiny denim overalls toddled after her, arms outstretched, falling on his bottom every few steps and laughing every time he fell. Elias had taken his first steps 3 weeks earlier. The investigation had finally closed his file. He had been a true orphan all along. His mother, an unidentified woman who had died in a clinic across the river. His existence stolen and used by men who had needed only a small, warm bundle to put into a little girl's arms. Vincent had signed the adoption papers on a Tuesday afternoon in March. Elias was a Castellano now, in name and in law and in every way that mattered. On the porch, in his old wicker rocker, Don Castellano sat with a wool blanket across his knees and watched his great-grandchildren chase each other across the lawn. He did not say much these days. He did not need to. The look on his face was enough. He had outlived enemies, partners, and 2 wives, and now in the soft April sun he was outliving his own grief. Inside the kitchen, Vincent stirred a pot of marinara that had been simmering for almost 3 hours. Bella stood beside him, pulling a tray of fresh basil bread from the oven. They had not announced anything. They had not made it loud. But sometime during those long winter weeks of healing, between her changing his shoulder bandage and him reading bedtime stories aloud to a little girl who had refused to sleep alone for almost a month, the quiet thing between them had stopped being quiet. She nudged him gently with her hip. He smiled. He smiled often now. It still surprised people who had known him before. The doorbell rang at 4 o'clock. Marcus Reed stood on the front steps in a button-down shirt that was almost certainly new, a small wrapped package in one hand, and a slight limp in the leg that had taken the round in Brooklyn. He had healed slower than Vincent had. He was almost 50. Bullets reminded a man of that. "Uncle Marcus," Luna shouted from the lawn. She crossed the grass in a streak of yellow and crashed into him with her arms wide. He grunted theatrically and lifted her off the ground. "Bigger every week, kid. You brought me something. Maybe." He set her down and handed her the small package. She tore the paper carefully, the way she opened everything now, savoring the moment. Inside was a brand new notebook, real leather cover, soft cream pages, bound by hand, a small silver pen tucked into a loop on the side. "It's so I can keep writing things down," she said, looking up at him. "That's right." Marcus crouched a little, slowly, with the wince of a man who still had stitches healing. "But this time, sweetheart, you write down the good things, the funny ones, the happy ones. You already wrote down enough of the other kind. From now on, you only fill these pages with the parts of life worth remembering." Luna hugged the notebook to her chest with both arms. That night, after the dishes were done and Elias had been laid in his crib and Dawn had been wheeled to bed, Vincent and Luna stepped out onto the upstairs balcony together. The April sky was clear. The first stars were beginning to come through above the trees. Luna leaned against the railing on her tiptoes, her small head tilted up. "Dad?" The word still landed in him like sunlight through a window. "Yes, sweetheart." She pointed up. "Are those Mommy Sophia and Mommy Elena up there?" He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her shoulders. He rested his chin on the top of her head. His eyes followed her finger to the bright cluster of stars rising above the dark line of trees. "Yes," he said. "They are, and they are watching us. And I think they are smiling." She was quiet for a moment. Her small hand found his where it rested on her shoulder, and she held it there. "Dad," she said softly, "I'm not cold anymore. Elias isn't cold anymore. We're a family now." Vincent closed his eyes. For 7 years, he had not been able to sleep without seeing his sister's face on the back of his eyelids. For 8 years, he had carried the empty silhouette of a woman he had once loved and lost. For 36 years, he had defined himself by what he could take and what he could hold by force. For the first time in any of those years, standing on that balcony with his daughter's small hand inside his own, Vincent Castellano felt something he did not recognize at first, because it had been a stranger to him for so long. Peace. Real, quiet peace. There are children who find us in the darkest alleys of our lives, not by accident, but because an invisible thread of fate was never truly broken. Vincent Castellano, the most feared name in the city of New York, finally understood that real power does not live in guns or in gold or in the silence of frightened men. Real power lives in the small word, "Dad," whispered for the first time by a 7-year-old girl who carries the eyes of someone he once loved, in a world he had stopped believing could still surprise him. This story is a reminder that the people we are meant to love are not always the people we plan for. Sometimes love walks into our life through a torn coat and a borrowed name. Sometimes the family we are searching for has been searching for us too, in alleys and shelters and dreams. And sometimes the coldest hearts thaw not because of grand events, but because of one small hand reaching upward and asking only to be kept warm. Hold the people you love a little tighter tonight. Be gentle with the children around you, the ones who cross your path even briefly, because you never know what storm they have walked through to get to your doorway. And if life has given you a second chance the way it gave Vincent his, do not waste it. Hold it the way he held his daughter on that balcony, with both arms, without apology. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. It truly helps us keep telling stories like this one. Share it with someone you love, someone who needs to be reminded that family can be found in the most unexpected places. We would love to hear from you. Did Luna's story remind you of someone in your own life? Has there ever been a moment when an unexpected encounter changed the way you saw your world? Leave us a comment below. We read every single one, and your words become part of the heartbeat of this little community we are building together. To everyone watching tonight, from wherever you are in the world, we wish you good health, a peaceful heart, and many warm and gentle days ahead. May your home always be full of laughter. May the people you love always come home safely. And may your life always have at least one small hand to hold. Until the next story, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we will see you again very soon.